The boss yelled at her in a meeting for being late, but didn't know he was shouting at his new director. Now let's dive into the story that took place in one of America's business hubs. Lucia Blake hadn't been particularly close to her father in recent years. Her childhood was spent constantly on the move. Her father, Mark Blake, was a well-known entrepreneur who founded and grew the multi-profile Blake Industries. He was always preoccupied with deals, business trips, negotiations, and expanding his enterprise. Lucia caught glimpses of him, usually when he came home late at night. Over time, she got used to taking care of herself. After university, she moved to another state to build her life on her own terms. But Mark Blake's sudden death from a heart attack sent shockwaves through business circles. Some said the company's growth was too fast, and that Lucia's father took on excessively high risks that affected his health. Others claimed that Mark was knowingly preparing the corporation for a new owner, though no one guessed those new hands would be his only daughter. According to his will, Lucia inherited the controlling stake in Blake Industries and gained the legal right to become CEO. The news stunned both financial markets and the company's management. Lucia herself was just as unsettled by the prospect. She had been running a small internet marketing business, enjoying a relatively free lifestyle. But the family legacy demanded a decision. The lawyers gave her two options: either sell all the shares to outside investors and continue living nearly untouched by such a huge business, or take over its management, continuing her father's life's work. Lucia was tormented by her conscience. Despite their complicated relationship, she knew that her father poured his soul into Blake Industries. Selling it felt like betraying his memory. Finally, she made her choice. Yes, I'll try. But she had her own plan. She wouldn't immediately announce that she was the heiress and future CEO. She needed to see everything from the inside, without any gloss or flattery. And so, when the lawyers had settled all the formalities, Lucia arrived at the New York office of Blake Industries. She came by a regular taxi, no motorcade. When she checked in at the security desk, she introduced herself as a new employee in the development department. Technically accurate, since she was formally listed in one of the company's subsidiaries. No one recognized her face. Media coverage mentioned an heiress, but lacked detailed photos. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. People in charge of onboarding simply heard she'd transferred from another office. They didn't ask many questions, especially since such transfers and internal rotations were common at Blake Industries. It never occurred to anyone that this young woman in her early 30s, sporting a neat haircut and a calm yet firm manner, could be their future boss. Rumors were circulating. Yes, supposedly someone is coming soon to head the company, but nobody knows exactly who. Some guessed that the board of directors would pick one of the top managers. No one suspected that a decision had already been made. Meanwhile, Lucia quietly settled into her workspace and began to study how things were run. From her very first day, Lucia sensed the tense atmosphere in the company. Rank-and-file employees spoke in hushed tones, trying to avoid crossing paths with certain directors and department heads unless it was absolutely necessary. The office itself looked modern: spacious corridors, glass partitions, stylish conference rooms. But there was an undercurrent of fear and mutual distrust. People seemed devoid of any real joy in their work or confidence in tomorrow. Particularly noticeable was Carlton Myers, the head of a large department occupying an entire floor. Rumor had it he'd earned his position by extracting any required results from his subordinates, even if that meant brutal overtime and relentless pressure. The corporate culture he imposed amounted to constant stress and fear of making mistakes. Myers loved demonstrating his power, publicly reprimanding employees right in the hallway or during meetings. A few days after Lucia's arrival, there was a scheduled meeting for top management and various department heads. Officially, It was to review quarterly results, but most guessed the main topic would be the new CEO. "We've heard someone from the board might come today to announce upcoming changes," employees whispered among themselves. Still incognito, Lucia wasn't on the attendee list, but she insisted on being allowed to attend as an observer, explaining that she needed a comprehensive understanding of business processes. The meeting coordinators shrugged and let her into a back section of the conference room where non-voting attendees usually sat. When it was time, the room filled up. The gathering began without any major official statements. First, some financial analysts presented, followed by a few people from marketing, but everyone was waiting for the main topic: any word on the new CEO. Instead, Carlton Myers took the podium, delivering a lengthy speech about efficiency, the need to maintain standards, and unquestionable discipline. Lucia noticed many people sitting rigidly in their chairs, as though trying to be invisible. By the end of Myers's talk, Lucia considered discreetly leaving to check out another department. But something unexpected happened. Information about a second conference room appeared on a display. There was a parallel meeting taking place. It seemed some employees were expected to move between the two sessions. Lucia glanced at her watch and realized she was late for the meeting she'd planned to attend after the first. Deciding to slip out quickly, she stepped into the hallway and followed the signs. At some point, she made a wrong turn and ended up in another wing where people were seating themselves for a subsequent briefing. By the time she realized she was lost, she was already 10 minutes late. Determined to at least make an appearance, she pushed open the heavy door and saw that everyone's eyes were on her. A manager was in mid-presentation, and next to her stood Carlton Myers himself, who was holding an extended Q&A session. He noticed the latecomer and abruptly cut off the speaker. "Why have you shown up in the middle of this presentation?" Myers growled into the microphone. "Haven't you learned punctuality? State your name." He had no clue whom he was speaking to. To Myers, she was just another faceless employee, easily shamed in public. Every gaze in the room was fixed on Lucia. She calmly named her fictional position, Development Department, but Myers didn't let her finish. 10 minutes late to an important meeting. Do you realize what that means?" Myers's anger rumbled through the microphone, as if he might fire her on the spot. "We don't tolerate such unprofessional conduct here. Sit over there and don't interrupt again." The room was silent. Not a single person dared to speak up. Myers had humiliated her in front of everyone, not realizing he was talking to the company's rightful heiress. Lucia stayed quiet, deciding not to reveal herself just yet. But inside she was boiling. This confirmed what she suspected. Blake Industries was driven by fear, and employees felt no support from management. Of course, this was precisely the reason she had come incognito, to witness it firsthand. After the unpleasant scene, Lucia understood that deep problems had taken root in the company. She wondered how the board and other top managers had turned a blind eye to Myers's behavior for so long. Presumably, his departments yielded good financial returns, and therefore his hard-nosed management style was conveniently overlooked. But it was just the tip of the iceberg. If the company culture allowed such tyranny, the real issues ran much deeper. In the days that followed, Lucia carefully explored the internal processes. She spoke with frontline employees, popped into corporate chats, and analyzed organizational charts. Many confided in her, sensing a friendly, curious colleague. They shared their frustrations, how their new ideas fell on deaf ears among leadership, which cared only about numbers and immediate gains, how they dreaded even requesting vacation or sick leave for fear of being deemed unreliable, particularly under bosses who demanded strict discipline. A few spoke privately about punishments for mistakes, which included hours-long public scoldings, after which humiliated employees resigned out of shame. Lucia was astonished at how people had come to accept such conditions, as though it was some unavoidable evil. It seemed they had abandoned the notion that work could be different. Yet many mentioned that they had once felt inspired by Mark Blake's charisma and energy. Though he was demanding, he tried to champion those eager to grow. But after Lucia's father stepped away from day-to-day operations a few years earlier, due to health problems, things went downhill. The enterprise had become sprawling, with departments functioning like separate fiefdoms, guided purely by financial metrics. No one was focused on cultivating a healthy corporate culture. Employees were trained to keep quiet and follow orders. Bureaucracy and fear of job loss stifled creativity and innovation. Simultaneously, Lucia was keen to see what support she might garner from the board. Most board members were large shareholders whose main interest lay in consistent profits, but Lucia's inheritance gave her the decisive vote on key matters. She noticed a few top managers who seemed more progressive, but hesitated to speak out due to fear of clashing with Myers and his ilk. For instance, Stephen Gibson, head of the Innovation Center, confided that he was afraid to propose new ideas for HR policy reform because Myers always bullies him and threatens budget cuts if he interferes where he doesn't belong. Lucia realized that with real support from upper management, professionals like Stephen and certain HR experts could transform the company. She continued quietly gathering data, observing how different leaders behaved, speaking to people, and researching hiring and firing policies. The more she learned, the clearer it became that systemic change was urgently needed. The problem wasn't just rude managers. The company faced real risks. Talented staff were leaving, while those who remained were too scared to innovate. The tipping point came when Lucia befriended a new marketing hire named Mia. Bright and promising, Mia had just completed her internship. She showed impressive awareness of digital trends and fresh ideas for promoting a new product. But she looked dejected and exhausted. In confidence, Mia explained that she had twice tried to present her ideas internally, but was repeatedly interrupted and ridiculed. Her boss frequently implied she needed to earn the right to speak, adding that maybe one day, if there was time, her project might be considered. Mia was thinking of quitting Blake Industries to find work where younger employees received real support. That story cemented Lucia's resolve. She realized that if this culture didn't change, people like Mia would depart, threatening the company's long-term competitiveness. The moment had come to reveal her true identity and initiate sweeping reform. The showdown came on the day the board of directors officially assembled to introduce the new CEO to the entire staff. Rumors had run wild, but most employees still had no idea who it would be. The conference hall, which held several hundred people, was packed with mid- and high-level managers, as well as key specialists. Carlton Myers, confident that he or his chosen candidate would claim the position, still acted like the ultimate authority. Lucia arrived at the same conference room, only this time not as a low-level staffer. She was accompanied by a lawyer, who, at her request, stayed off stage until the right moment. The meeting began under the guidance of the board's chairman, Mr. Robertson. He made an introductory statement. "Friends, we have been going through a challenging period since the loss of our founder, Mr. Mark Blake. However, life goes on, and new opportunities lie ahead for Blake Industries. Today, we will introduce you to the person to whom Mark entrusted this company's future. Please give a warm welcome to Lucia Blake." The room reacted in various ways. Some people stared in confusion, recalling seeing Lucia only as a new employee in the development department. Carlton Myers turned pale upon hearing the name Blake, but he was slow to connect the dots. When Lucia stepped up to the podium and introduced herself, a ripple of whispers and exclamations spread across the audience. She spoke calmly, her voice measured. I understand many of you weren't expecting this turn of events. Some of you may have anticipated other candidates, but I am the one who inherited the controlling stake according to my father's will and have been officially appointed CEO by the board of directors. I spent some time here posing as a regular employee to understand how things really work in the company. And I now know for certain that we can't continue operating in an atmosphere of fear and distrust. The crowd buzzed with conversations. Myers, trying to maintain composure, finally blurted, "Excuse me, Ms. Blake, or whatever we should call you now. Are you sure you have the qualifications to run this corporation? You only just joined us. What can you possibly know?" Lucia paused, considering her response. Then she said, "I know enough to see just how destructive the culture here has become. I know that a strategy built on pressure and intimidation may yield quick profits, but will damage the company in the long run. We already see signs of talent leaving and a decline in innovative thinking. That's something we have to stop." At that point, Board Chairman Robertson stood and added, "Mr. Myers, please follow the meeting protocol. Lucia Blake is legitimately our new CEO. The board has approved this decision, based on the legal will." But Carlton, unable to hide his frustration, pressed on. "With this kindness and empathy approach, we'll go under. Business is about survival of the fittest, not coddling employees. I've spent years driving my department to record numbers. Do you think your changes will save us?" Normally, such an outburst could rattle a less confident person, but Lucia firmly held a printout of departmental turnover and HR complaints. She knew that Myers's department had the highest attrition and most grievances. Turning to those present, she said, "For a long time, this behavior went unpunished because people assumed the ends justify the means. But I've seen the metrics, and I know how many talented staff members we've lost. I've seen how people are afraid to even speak to their own boss. This management model is entirely at odds with the principles my father stood for. It's now my responsibility to act. Carlton Myers, I find it necessary to relieve you of your position as department head, effective immediately." Gasps filled the room, and Myers jumped up, face red with outrage. "You're firing me? Right here? Right now?" "Yes," said Lucia, her voice unwavering. "You're welcome to sue or speak with our legal team, but my decision is made. Your management style is incompatible with our new priorities." This moment was a point of no return. Myers, pale and furious, left the room escorted by security. Lucia continued, "Please understand, this isn't personal revenge or a whim. It marks the start of a comprehensive transformation. We must restore an environment of mutual respect, an environment in which employees can share ideas without fear. If we fail, we're heading toward decline. I promise that together we'll build a new future for Blake Industries, where everyone's contributions are valued." The tension in the room was palpable, but Lucia spotted flickers of hope in some eyes. Someone even mustered the courage to applaud. It meant she had supporters. Even if not everyone was on board, there were enough people ready for a change. Right after the dramatic firing of Carlton Myers, the company entered a challenging phase of reorganization. Lucia understood that dismissing an authoritarian manager alone wouldn't solve everything. There needed to be a comprehensive overhaul of performance evaluations, the incentive system, and communication channels across departments. From now on, employees had the option to contact HR, or even Lucia herself, directly if they felt that their rights or ideas were being ignored by their superiors. Over a few weeks, a new Committee for Corporate Culture and Innovation was formed. It included representatives from various departments, from entry-level staff to top managers. Stephen Gibson, head of the Innovation Center, became one of the main leaders of this initiative, as he had long dreamed of blending creativity and respect for employees with strong financial performance. Under Lucia's leadership, the committee introduced ways to encourage the exchange of ideas, internal hackathons, mentorship programs, and open project presentations. HR policy also underwent major shifts. Now, Blake Industries began focusing not just on hard results, but also on teamwork, supportiveness, and ethical communication. Department heads who continued to cling to old, authoritarian tactics faced a choice: adapt to the new standards or leave. Some resigned rather than change their ways, but others, seeing Lucia's clear stance, decided to follow the new path. Naturally, the transition wasn't without challenges. Some shareholders and board members worried these humanistic ideas could harm profits, but Lucia convinced them otherwise. Research and market reports indicated that 21st century success stories come from companies that foster trust, attract and retain top talent, and nurture a culture of innovation. Employees unafraid to offer new ideas often discover ways to improve products or processes, ultimately boosting profits. Beyond internal measures, Lucia worked on strengthening Blake Industries' external reputation. She met with potential partners, emphasizing that the company would now operate under transparent, ethical principles. Gradually, business circles noticed the evolving atmosphere at Blake Industries and grew more inclined to work with it. Moreover, removing Carlton Myers mitigated the scandalous reputation of employee mistreatment. One of the most inspiring changes for Lucia was the surge in employee initiative. Mia, the new hire from marketing, soon presented a robust digital marketing strategy and received the go-ahead to implement it, something that would likely have been ignored before. She was given resources and a team for her plan. This was just one of many examples. Hundreds of staff members felt heard and appreciated. 6 months later, an internal audit conducted by the board showed the company's attrition rate had halved, while the employee satisfaction index had risen significantly. New automation solutions emerged to reduce overhead costs, and by year's end, financial indicators were on an upswing, quelling skeptics' concerns. Though Lucia felt enormous pressure, she also experienced deep fulfillment. She knew she was on the right track. Employees now saw her not merely as the founder's daughter, but as a leader willing to listen and overhaul a broken system. Her approach, based on dialogue and mutual respect, was steadily reinvigorating the enthusiasm and trust once instilled by Mark Blake. In the end, Blake Industries, freed from fear and red tape, began to thrive again. People worked with greater dedication, unafraid of ridicule or punishment for thinking creatively. Innovative ideas and teamwork took center stage, and employees felt that their contributions truly mattered. Thus ended the story of Lucia Blake, who walked into the office disguised as a regular employee, only to face a hostile culture head-on. Taking the CEO position, she proved that respect for people isn't a weakness. It's the vital foundation for a company's real prosperity. Thank you for reading this story to the end. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll find more inspiring tales and useful insights.